Hello, everybody, and welcome to Listic Emails, Email and More, a Q&A with. I'm your host, Skip Federa, and I'm coming to you from a new location. If you've watched this before, I'm in a brand new studio that I'm trying out. So fingers crossed, it all works out. On today's episode, we will get the secrets to crafting compelling subject lines. Now, for those of you who are joining us for the first time, this is really your show. We bring the experts, as are on your screen right now. But it is your questions that drive the conversation. It's unscripted, unrehearsed, sometimes a bit of a train wreck, but it is always a whole lot of fun. So bear with me while I share some slides with you and we'll get some admin bits and pieces out of the way. So we have a great show lined up for you today. We're going to explore question number one, why subject lines still matter. We're going to talk about how to research and test subject lines, where AI fits into the creative process, and how to use cross-channel data to better write your subject lines. But before we get into all that, I want to thank our sponsors. Without them, we couldn't make this at all work. So this series has been brought to you by our platinum sponsor, RPE Origin, and our silver sponsor, Bloomreach.
Thank you.
Wasn't sure what color we went with for Bloomreach. Anyway, a big thank you from all of us to them for everything they do to make this series possible. Now, we have a new episode of this series about once a month. But if you've missed any of our previous episodes or want to catch up on series 1 or 2, then go to the Holistic Emails website and you can catch up on every episode. And I actually was trawling through some of the past episodes the other day looking for a great quote that we had. And there's some brilliant stuff in there. So I highly encourage you. It's worth the time. Go back and check out some of our previous episodes. Now, as I said, we have an absolutely rock star panel for you today. First off, we have Ryan Phelan. Ryan is this year's Thought Leader of the Year from the Ryan, tell us where that award's from, because I just blanked on it.
The ANA.
The ANA, that's right. See, I was going to go DMA, and I knew that was wrong.
Yeah, that was wrong.
Well done.
Ryan is the Email Thought Leader of the Year, as chosen by the members of the ANA, and also he's the managing partner of our platinum sponsor, RPE Origin. With Ryan, we've got Dana Trump, Senior Integrated Marketing Manager at Bye Bye Baby, Phil Hill, Life Cycle Marketing Manager at Earnin, and as advertised, we were meant to have Tony Allen, but Tony couldn't be with us today due to an unforeseen incident. So unfortunately, we've had to make that change. Now, with me, as always, is best-selling author and another award-winning thought leader, Kath Pei of Holistic Email Marketing. Okay. Right. This is a huge topic, and our time always passes way too quickly. So, folks, get your questions into the Q&A tab over there on the right-hand side of your screen, and I will get as many of your questions to the panel as possible. Now, if you were paying attention to our last episode, you'll remember that I've been in email marketing since Yahoo was relevant and AOL was still a thing. And in all those years, more time has been spent talking about, writing about, pontificating on, and avoiding subject lines. More than probably almost any other topic on the planet. Nothing scares the average person more than the subject line. Who knows what kind of chaos would be caused if a colleague or a friend or even your mom misinterpreted the subject line and what you're trying to get across in the email you wanted them to open. So you'd think the only people that don't struggle with these simple email subject lines are email marketers. It's easy to craft a subject line that'll resonate with one person, right? Or is it? So let me know in the chat. Ping me in the chat. Let me know, do you struggle with a subject line for, you're just sending an email to a friend? Do you struggle with those? Or is it just your marketing emails that the subject line is a little bit tougher? Because, I'm interested to see what you all think. Because as I was thinking about this, writing a subject line to one person, I just write it to the person. But writing a subject line that resonates with an audience that could be in the millions, that sounds a lot tougher to me. And if we spend so much time thinking about subject lines, why do we spend so little time writing them? From name, subject line, and maybe a few lines of copy are all we get to grab a reader's attention. In direct mail, the subject line is a bit like the text on the outside of the envelope. And frequently, that's where a copywriter actually starts. You get a good hook on that outer, and that drives the open and pushes the recipients all the way through the journey to the call to action. But the sense I get from email marketers is that all too often, the subject line is almost an afterthought. We write the email and then like, oh, what should the subject line be? It's not the hook that drives the copy. It's almost like the tail wagging the dog. Sorry about the mixed metaphor there. So this is where I want to start with our panel. So first, thank you all for joining me. But Ryan, are subject lines still important?
Yes, although not as important as everybody thinks they are.
Really?
Yes. I'm going to
Okay.
start this with controversy.
All right.
I think there's an inordinate amount of focus on subject lines, right? They have their place. They're important. They help qualify the brand into the offer and pulling it down into the message. But this is primarily a fault of the ESPs, is that a lot of the advancement in A/B targeting or A/B testing and reporting and all that stuff has been focused around the subject line. And it's fairly easy. People think they're pros. They go in, they fill in 2 subject lines, they do an A/B test, and they're testing and they're advanced. But the reality is that there's so much more beyond it. We put so much effort into a subject line and the science behind that, we forget everything else. And so I think there just has to be balance. It's important, yes. Is it the end all and be all? No.
Any rebuttals?
I see where he's coming from. Definitely, in all my years, so 24 years of working in email, and training thousands of students and everything, I can guarantee you that once or twice a week I'm still asked about subject lines, and one of the questions I'm asked is, should we go short or long, and everything like this as well. So they're wanting that silver bullet, and I understand, because it does have an impact. There are 3 steps. One is that the first step is obviously they look at the email in the inbox. They're doing their triage, and they'll see the brand, right? They'll see the subject line, and then depending on how they've got it, they're either going to have the pre-header text or they might have a preview pane. So yes, it does make a difference. But I think instead of, as Ryan says, instead of us sort of getting so worked up about it, we really have to understand the value of it and what really can move the needle with the subject line, right? Because often what we're doing is we're moving the needle, but we're actually optimizing for the wrong results. So this is the kind of thing we want to make sure that we're doing. And that's why testing of subject lines do make sense. But I also find a lot of optimization of subject lines and testing of subject lines that people think that they're so important that that's the only test that ever gets done, right? So
sorry, Kath, is it the people think it's really important, or is it because subject line testing is just, as to Ryan's point, the ESPs would make it dead easy?
True. I believe that it's possibly a combination of the 2, and as Ryan has said too, we love, so agencies like RP, Origin, and Holistic, we love ESP. So don't get me wrong about any of this, but a lot of the education in the industry has come from the ESP. So therefore, the ESP, they're a provider of a SaaS dire right? A service, a technology for us as marketers to use. And we've been trained on that because there was such a dire lack of education from any other source. You can't go and get a marketing degree in email marketing itself. So therefore, we're kind of relying upon our tech that we use on a day-to-day basis to actually teach us. And I think that's how it got disproportionate to the reality of it. And also the fact that we don't do as extensive testing as we should, and we could find things differently. So yes, right. I do agree with Ryan, but probably not as strong as he's So it's not that controversial. I mean, I'm not being that controversial with him.
All right. This is not supposed to be a love-in. So Dana, you were nodding along there.
I think that subject lines are highly visible. So everyone's seeing them. Your C-suite seeing them. Your investors are seeing them. Everyone's seeing them, and everyone has an opinion. And I feel like that's why there's so much controversy, scrutiny around subject lines, is because they're the first thing anyone sees, and everyone has an opinion, and they don't know the back end of what else is going on in the email. So I agree with both Ryan and Kath on this.
Okay. All right. Phil, let's change gears slightly. Because unless you disagree that subject lines are not important, and then I really wish we'd invited somebody else on the panel. But okay, if we're all in agreement that subject lines are really important.
Oh, I don't know that I agree with really important.
Still important. Actually, how about still important? Somewhat
still important. I'll go with yes.
Somewhat important.
Somewhat.
Ought to be considered in the grand scheme of things.
Yes.
Okay.
Still have a place.
If we all agree with that, Ryan. No, but historically, we measured subject lines badly because historically we measured them with an open. And opens are pretty much useless these days. Now, they were never that good to begin with, but they're even more useless now. So what's the best way to measure if the subject line works?
So that was me, right?
That's for you, man.
Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah. So when I'm thinking about subject lines, I'm thinking about what the job of it is, what's connected to in the email. And so if we're thinking about hooking someone into the email and get them to open, however well you can track it, the click, attaching that action to the click, and thinking about was the click CPA inside the email good enough and matching like what the subject line was. Can you still hear me okay?
Uh-huh.
We can hear you, but Kath is right. Your sound has changed somewhat. So after you answer this, go in and see if your computer switched mics. But go ahead and finish.
Cool. Yeah. So thinking about like the subject line, making sure that it like matches the CTA or like the main message in your email, and then like when you're testing out a bunch of different subject lines, don't just like throw like two random phrases into your subject line. Test two different concepts at the same time. So for example, if you're testing out using emojis that everyone likes to do on St. Patrick's Day, throw a clover in one, don't throw a clover in the other. So then you're testing two things that are relevant to each other, and you're testing out a concept that you can then use for another holiday in the future and actually learn something rather than saying clovers work. So you're going to throw clovers in all your emails because that's obviously not what you want to do in the future.
Oh yes, that way to celebrate July 4th with a clover.
So we've run at Holistic, we've run hundreds of tests on this because, and we do audits for our new clients all the time, and we will see that yes, they test subject lines, and that's probably often the case. Is the only thing they're testing, to Ryan's point, but they're also testing them based on the open rate. Now, this is what we always convince them to actually do a test based on the click rate, which is also very easy to do as long as you're measuring it and you're using the click rate or the conversion rate, even better, as a success metric, then it's not a problem. It's only when you're using an ESP to do 10%, and then after 2 hours, flick it over to the winner of the open rate. That's when you have a problem. Okay. So what we do is we just say to our clients, we say, listen, go get the top 10 results for open rates. Go get the campaigns. Go get the top 10 campaigns for click rates. Go get the top 10 campaigns for conversion rates. And very often, in fact, more often than not, you'll see that there's very little correlation between them. So optimizing for opens, for subject lines, doesn't necessarily mean that, it's going to give you the meaningful metric that you're possibly wanting to get, which is conversions. So again, and this is what I guess I think we've all been saying really, is that the open rates are unreliable, and as Skip, you said, they're even more unreliable now with Apple's MPP.
Exactly. So we've got a question from the audience, and it's a great question. Jumping ahead a little bit in the conversation, but that's fine. So this is from Liz Smith, head of CRM at Aspen University, and this is specifically about subject line personalization with names, but a lot of the people on her list have very long names, would take up most of the subject line. What are your thoughts on that? But let's talk about personalization in general after we answer Liz's question. So, how should we do it? Should we do it? Discuss.
Okay, I just want to quickly just clarify, and then I'll let everyone else answer. So when you're saying name, you're talking about just the first name. You're not talking about like a full name, right?
I'm going to guess that's true.
I'm going to guess that's true. Let's go with that.
So yeah.
I would say use it every once in a while. Use it sparingly, right? If you use it all the time, then it becomes the same. It becomes expected, and so it loses its effectiveness. If it's too long, it's their name. They know it's long.
Yeah.
And it is what it is. But I would think if you look at your list, I would have to posit that, it's the exception, not the rule, that it's long. Make sure it's just the first name. But if you use it every once in a while, it's their name. They know it.
Yeah. And I would agree, because I would say that sometimes it's more the novelty effect, and therefore the more you do it, the novelty goes away. And I think I saw a survey recently. Skip, you might be able to help me with this, but it was I think it was in the latest DMA tracker report. The consumers are now no longer considering, and I don't think it's been for years that they've considered the first name as being any form of personalization. They know that we can just do mail merge as such, right? Personalization is much more than the name. It's personalization, even more from if it's B2B to the company and everything. It's more on their actions, what they're like, their preferences, things like that. What they've just been recently browsing, rather than, oh, hey Kath, we know it's you. That's kind of lost a lot. So that doesn't mean that you don't do it, but just don't put a lot of value on the fact that you do it.
Well,
We've done lots of tests like that, and it's really made minimal difference.
And that gets to another part about subject lines. It's really hard to personalize in a subject line other than something like name or location or whatever, because you have limited space. And if you're gonna personalize, as Kath was saying, around what was the latest thing they downloaded, well, that's probably going to be handled in an automation, and the subject line would be tailored to that email. The other thought I had, going back to the name thing, is, and this is something that's true if you do a lot of international mailing, is make sure your forms are localized, because not a Western form with first name last name does not work in every culture, and you do get because people have multiple first names, you'll get very long strings of characters.
I think off that too is you have to be testing, making sure that your merges are actually working. I think so many times that QA step is sometimes missed, and then in the inbox you get name and then subject line. So the importance of always testing, multiple eyes on that test as well. I think that's also a crucial step. But making sure that your subject line makes sense without the name. So if a customer's name isn't there, it still makes sense in the inbox, I think is also important.
Yeah.
I was going to throw one more idea out there of like, if the names for the person who asked the question are really long, you mess around with like throwing the name to the back end of the subject line, so you still get your point across in your subject line and capturing their attention with whatever your message is for them to see, and then still personalize them. So like if they're on their computer, they can actually see their name. If they're on their phone, maybe they don't see their name, and it doesn't like ruin your message. by just covering up the whole message with their name.
And that's a great point, Phil. And sort of to Ryan's point then too, we all know our names, and then it's like, does that really excite us? Whereas you putting a really attractive, benefit-driven verb at the beginning, front loading it with those impactful kind of words and emotions and everything, that's more likely, or a deal that's more likely to convert us, to opening up and reading the email. You've got to, again, you could do that test as well and see if that's going to give you a better result. And with the then backloading of the first name or however it is.
It's like talking to a salesperson that just came out of Sales 101 and they use your name in almost every sentence, Ryan. Because Ryan, I want you to make sure that you're really getting my point here. So I'm going to use your first name, Ryan, as often as I possibly can.
Oh, I want to buy whatever you got.
Oh, there you go. There you go.
Like my 18-month-old granddaughter. My name for her, her name for me, whatever. She calls Gigi, right? So Gigi, blah, blah, blah. Gigi, blah, blah, blah. Gigi, blah, blah, blah. Because that's how she's been taught. Addie, can you go do this? Addie, pick that up. Addie, come and have dinner. So it's really, really cute. So yeah, it does lose its novelty, even with your granddaughter.
Right. So yeah. And you have a much greater affinity with your granddaughter than you do with any brand. I hope. Right. Let's get the elephant in the room out of the way early, shall we? So should I just outsource all my subject line writing to ChatGPT?
I mean, if you're lazy, sure, go for it.
Or if you don't have a copy.
Harsh.
No. Why would you let a computer a stupid computer at that be in charge of your brand? It is great for ideation. I've written a little bit about just ChatGPT and Google's and Bing's thing. It is in their infancy. And so why would you ask an infant to write a subject line or anything? What I think you ought to do, though, is use it for what it is. It's a beta product. It's an alpha product. Play around with it a little bit. Let it give you some ideas. Let it expand your horizons and give you some content ideas, but do not lift it from there unless it nails it, unless you're like, oh, that's really good. But don't be dependent on it. Use it for what it is. It's an experiment. It's a test at scale, right? But you know your brand better than a computer. You cannot, from an input standpoint, tell them your brand voice, your brand positioning, your customer demographic, your products in your email, and what gets your customers excited or what works, right? You can't teach that.
You can.
Yeah.
You absolutely can, but it would take you longer to teach it than it would just to write the.
Yes.
That was what our copy team started using ChatGPT, and they found it just took so long to teach ChatGPT about the brand, and it just was a waste of time at that point. They live the brand, so it's much easier for them.
We've done it for a couple of clients in that we would put the body of the copy of the email right in, and so that it's reading that, and then we've gone and said, give us 3 different emotions. So we'll say, give us a curiosity-based subject line, give us a loss aversion one. So we're doing it that way, and then but you have to be very specific, and again, you have to really, really try and nail it, and it takes a while for you to practice to get it right. And then again, as Ryan said, that's just for inspiration. You are the marketer. That's why you have been training, you have been guiding, you've been directing the ChatGPT, same as you're going to be directing your audience. So therefore, that definitely have a play around, use it, but don't just, as Ryan said, don't just lift it and just go, great, it came up with it, so it must be okay. And then that's when you do your test.
Phil, what are you doing with AI? Anything?
No. I've used it to help me inspire some presentations and ideas there. But for subject lines, no, not today. I much rather like get in a room with like the copywriters or like the other email marketers and like plan out subject lines for the week, like I've done in the past. Like we already know the content for weekly emails or daily emails of that nature and the products involved. I mean, it can be like a lot of fun, just like a quick 30-minute meeting, like on a Thursday, line out the emails for the following week. It's a good time.
Ours are on a Thursday too. It is a good time. It's the one meeting I look forward to.
Yep.
I kind of feel like there might be wine involved.
There may or may not have been beverages involved. But like it's good because it can bring in like obviously like the email team is responsible for email performance and everything, but this allows you to like bring in some people from like other teams and like get them involved in the process. Like you can bring product marketers in or product managers, obviously the creative team, and then like make more collaborative and expend that energy doing that team building rather than relying on AI.
I love that idea. Actually, I am gonna nick that idea. It's like, hey guys, it's Thursday afternoon or whatever. Come in, relax. We'll host a little soiree and we'll just throw some ideas around about subject lines. Because the thing is, ChatGPT might give you a great answer and it might nail it, but you're just likely to get that great answer from the cleaner or the receptionist.
Yeah, I mean, it's your job as a marketer, right? Is all this stuff, come up with a subject line, just go for it, right? In the beginning, I talked about we put too much importance on it. We stress over it. We obsess over a subject line. It's a subject line. Your job as an email marketer, come up with a subject line and move on. There is so much other downstream stuff that we have to work on, from making sure the message is relevant, that the products are relevant, that we look at segmentation, that we look at all this downstream stuff. It's a subject line. If I come up with it and go,
But I can see the appeal, and the appeal has been there for a few years. There's a company we all know who do AI generated subject lines, right? And that's everyone's dream, is to be able to afford to use them, right? And you sort of, I've always questioned. I don't understand. For one, they're testing on the wrong metric in my mind, but there is that desire, and I think it all boils back down to that email marketing is hard, right? And we're just trying to make little improvements or get those silver bullets wherever we can. And sort of like, great, I've paying lots of money and I've outsourced it, and therefore I'm confident it's going to be great, and I can then worry about other things instead. So I totally understand where everyone's coming from when they're wanting to do it.
But here's my thing with that service, real quick, Skip. Here's my thing with those kind of services, right? I've intelligently, through AI, created a fantastic subject line that's been tested and great, fantastic. I open the message and it's stupid. It doesn't apply to the customer. It doesn't have products that appeal to me or my demo or my cohort. So I have spent a whole bunch of money for people to open a stupid email. Why don't we reverse that and spend the money to make the email smart and just be really smart on how to get the person to open it?
I'm going to clap for that. I wholeheartedly agree.
Anybody wants to clap for that, there's a reaction button at the bottom of your interface.
There we go.
Yeah. We were testing like 15 subject lines when I first started out my role with some of the AI tools, and I was like, wow, let's spend the money elsewhere. There are so many other good tools that we should be using. So wholeheartedly agree.
Well, it's interesting because I think what's come out of this little part of this discussion, and then we'll move on, is actually maybe we're doing the whole thing backwards in a lot of ways. So, I still know a lot of people that write the whole email and then write the subject line. And the problem with that is you're now so deep into the email that you can't come up with a good subject line. So I love the idea of, from Dan and Phil, of let's decouple that, right? We know what we're going to be talking about during the week. We may have already written it, but we'll do subject line separate. we'll do it as a separate exercise with
Yeah.
a different headspace. I think that's brilliant. And then Ryan, to your point, getting somebody into the email is pointless if they don't click. If they don't read, they don't click, it damages your brand. All those things.
Yeah.
All right. So we've got a question from Andre from Fizzy. And he is interested in the usage of emojis impacting inbox deliverability or inbox placement.
Does it? I don't think it does.
It doesn't. No. We've done numerous tests. I've also read lots of other reports as well, and our tests have confirmed what those other reports. It doesn't. If you don't have a deliverability problem, if you do have a deliverability problem, then probably lots of other things will also
You have bigger problems.
Yeah.
If you don't have deliverability problems generally, then it's not, an emoji isn't going to affect it at all.
No.
But that goes back to what Dana was saying earlier in terms of your subject line is so visible, and that sounds to me so much like a CEO kind of comment. You know, you put an emoji in our subject line, you're going to kill our deliverability. Let me prove it to you. And they go to their spam folder, and every email has an emoji in it. Why? Because emojis work in email. That's why spam exists, right? Spammers are the best email marketers. See, Ryan, I can be controversial too.
It's true though.
It is. So that is one of those things that so quickly can become an urban legend that Chat GPT won't understand, and then it'll start telling you that, and then we're on a spiral to Chat GPT taking over the world.
I welcome my new overlords. But I think you've got a good point, right? The emoji draws the attention to the subject line draws it to the brand. The person makes a mental or unconscious decision about, do I really need that, right? And may increase unsubscribe because you drew attention to it and you made them think, right? Now, does that mean I should never do emojis in my subject lines? No, do it every once in a while. It's another occasional use strategy. Sometimes it's fun. Sometimes it's good, but if you put the same happy face in every freaking email, I get annoyed, and that's why I unsubscribe.
And think of
at least you unsubscribe. That's nice.
I get eye blind, so I just stop realizing that they're sending it.
Yes.
Yeah.
But also, it fall into the rest of the emoji heavy subject line days. Like when I was talking about St. Patrick's Day, I went to my email on St. Patrick's Day this year. Clover, like gold pot. Maybe skip sending an email that day and don't fall into the mix of those, and be aware of when that might happen. Valentine's Day, hearts, roses, skip it.
Yeah.
No, that's
and you also have to make sure that it aligns with your brand as well. Sometimes there's a real disconnect. It's like your brand. Say if you are a financial, right? So Andre, he's just, in the financial industry. So putting an emoji in there may not be the right thing for your brand, but only you will know that. And I would be then recommending to do a test on it. And that would be not because of the emoji alone sake, but it's the coupling with the brand, and is it therefore expected? Or is there that kind of disconnect, and you just go, because once you get people stopping and looking and going, is that really, certainly when we're talking financial, right? Is that really my bank? Oh, it could be phishing, right? And then you could get complaints and everything like that because they're suspicious because it doesn't align with your brand. So they're the kind of things that you have to think through.
I like the idea of trying to get that through compliance, and compliance making you add a line at the bottom of the email that says, a pot of gold is not available to all customers.
You're kind of close on how that would happen. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So, but emojis are kind of a form of being creative, and we're trying to get cut through. We're trying to get attention. We're trying to get people to stop the scroll, but we want to get them to stop the scroll for the right reason. And how do you balance that need to stop the scroll with setting out clearly what the subject of the email is about?
Yeah,
It's got to be.
because
Go ahead, Kath.
no, you go. You go.
It's got to be additive, right? You can't just slop something in there because it's, to Phil's point, because it's Valentine's Day or, St. Patty's Day or whatever. Make it relevant. Make it make it a part of the subject line that actually makes sense. But putting it in for putting it in is a waste of time, right? It's an occasional use strategy. If it feels like you need to put one in, great, go for it. But I don't know anybody's going to stop the scroll on you had an emoji or not. I think what stops the scroll is the previous emails that you've sent, the brand, and the subject line in that order.
Yeah. And you have to take into account then the actual email. Now, a lot of when you're this is the scary bit. So when you're optimizing for opens and not actually for clicks or conversions, there are lots of tactics that you can do that will increase your open rates quite radically. But you also can risk, think back to the well-known one, the clickbait headlines. We still see them in newspapers and blogs and things like that. So they're just to get your attention, and then you're reading through the article and you're trying to get to that original point that you're attracted to in the subject line, and it's not actually there because they literally just did that to get your attention. So now you go away, you're disappointed in the brand, you're disengaged and all the rest of it, and then you're going to never. So you don't want to risk that. The more accurate you are, the more specific you are to what is true within the email is going to give you, and that's generally you communicating the value or the benefits, and you can be doing that, very cleverly, using like things like the verbs and the even call to actions within the subject line. There's so many things you can be doing. They're using behavioral science and the psychology. All of those things are what you really need to be focusing on, rather than just sort of trying to get opens.
Well, at the end of the day, my time is precious. Everybody on this call's time is precious. I'm taking time I'm giving you time. Hello, brand marketer. I'm giving you some time. And you've promised to make my time worth it, right? You've promised to give me value for that time. And if the subject line doesn't line up with the email, then you've stolen that time from me.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We're like building a relationship with like all of our customers. And if we're like hoodwinking them and like bait and switching, we're like losing trust with them. And so in this relationship, your brand will start to become synonymous with like distrust and like not valuable opens. Essentially, if you're just like lying to them in subject lines with something random and not matching your content in the email, leading to like lower open rates over time with like a lot of your customers.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and just to tease our next episode, which is all on re-engagement and reactivation campaigns. So if you've been sending out some rubbish subject lines and you've learned a lot from this session, and now you're like, uh-oh, I've got a lot of people that aren't paying attention. Join us next month.
This message is brought to you by...
This message has been brought to you by RPE Origin. Okay. So, all right. How do I do it? We promised folks the secrets for crafting a compelling subject line. Maybe we should go back to testing and optimization. Because we've talked about that a lot. Everybody, I think, at least once has used the phrase "test it." Put an emoji in it, test it. Personalization, test it. So, what should we be testing? How should we be testing? And what are some of your tricks? I'm especially keen to hear some of your tricks, Dana and Phil, because you both are at the coalface. Not that Kath and Ryan aren't at the coalface, but as they are thought leaders, they should have all the tricks. You guys probably have some of the newer tricks.
The newer tricks.
Are you calling us old?
Yeah.
I think you just called us old, Kath.
He did. You did.
Fresher tricks. I'm older than both of you.
Listen, Sonny, you and I are going to have words.
I would say
Okay.
we do real time testing. So we CAS said 10-10, we do 20-20-60. And then after like 2 hours, the 60% of the audience. But we weren't always doing in real time. They were doing 50-50 testing. But I truly believe that the in real testing gets you a better result. And then it helps the open rate for that specific campaign. And if you get a learning, again, subject line's so subjective. If the learnings come over time, that's great. But really that subject line test is to help that specific email get more opens. That's
I do very similar to Dana and do like that 10-10-80 real-time testing. But like I was saying earlier, of like making sure like you're testing a concept and like measure like concept versus concept and track that so that you can go back and learn what's resonating with your customers over time. We also we're doing this like on every single email that we were sending that was like an ad hoc email. And so we learned a lot over the course of 3 months time, so we can apply those learnings and better brief in creative for our creative team in the future to know what we're looking for specifically, knowing what resonates and sharing that information with them so that they know when they're writing subject lines, these are the things that are resonating, and we can continue to improve on those learnings and continue to test winners against winners down the road.
So Phil, it sounds like you document that. When somebody,
I love documentation.
So when somebody new joins the team, do they get the playbook? Do they get the Phil Hill playbook? This is the stuff that works. This is stuff that doesn't work.
Yeah, so that's stuff that should be included in an onboarding doc. So these are all the tests that we've done. This is our subject line testing.
Yep.
But no, I just started a job 2 months ago. I have a lot of questions, but there's a deck that we have for old tests that we've done, so I don't have to go back and redo old tests or question if we've ever tried an emoji in a subject line and how did it do against non-emojis. That information should exist. Memorialize it, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
I have a question for you guys. In real time, our internal debate is: do we wait 2 hours? Do we wait 3 hours? What do you guys do? Have you found any best practice in that terms?
So when we do tests with our clients, we've done both, and we generally will opt for the non-real time.
Okay.
Because if you're doing real time based on open rates, you can probably do it because you'll get after 2 hours, 3 hours, you'll get enough. But if you're doing it on clicks, you're going to have too small after 2 hours. So you have to run it for longer. If you're doing it on conversions, you have to wait days, possibly even weeks, for the real results to come out. That's why we do it, because we generally do it on conversions. So therefore, we tend to wait and we do the 50-50, and then we will be looking at the results and getting those learnings in. And we always start with a hypothesis as well. So that means that we can test the same test, even though it's on a subject line, using different wording, but because we're loyal to and supporting that hypothesis, then we can be testing it multiple times and then walk away with a learning after we've done it. So it all depends on how quickly everyone actions the emails. If you could, there are so many variables that you can go in and just do a pre-check to sort of go, does this make sense, right? And then go in and have a look at those. Even look at the click rate as well and the conversions. You can do that after the fact, and see if it does support you doing that. And if it does, then brilliant, because that is an easy way of doing it. But there are some brands who will find out it won't be the same. It won't. So that's how we do it.
Okay.
Yeah, I was gonna say it would depend. I like what your answer was, Kath. Because it was for some of the companies that I worked at, the conversion that we were looking for was a sell today, on items. Whereas if you're longer term, I don't know, a legal firm for whatever reason, and you want to acquire a customer in the future or something, that might take a long time, and subject line testing might not be it for you, honestly. But there are just some longer tail things that could need more than 4 hours, to your point of your question. But most of the time I'm doing stuff that can be decided within like a 4-hour window of sending.
Yeah, that's ours. We're very e-commerce, so sell immediately.
Yeah.
Online jobs.
Buy now.
We're selling emails. We'll be sending emails every day, to sometimes twice a day. So but we do it on clicks, by click-through rate, not open rate.
Skip back to your original question. And Phil kind of touched on this. I test subject lines into a nomenclature, into a guidelines. I want to know what my subject line should include, but not necessarily this one versus that one. What I want to get to over time and develop a testing plan to say, I'm going to test doing percentages off in the subject line, or product name, or personalization, or emojis, or do I do discount and product name? Do I do something totally irrelevant? And if I come up with those guidelines, then I'm pretty assured that if I got it backed up by data, that whatever I put in there will consistently perform, right? And then I move on to something else to test, right? Something else within the body of the email, something else within the product offering or the discount.
Yes.
So
like creating a methodology or a formula.
Methodology.
Yeah. And so the subject lines are not going to look the same. They're not going to read the same, but you're following them through. They'll have different, but you understand that this is actually the best formula for it. And then, of course, you want to shake things up again as well.
Every once in a while, throw in a random thing, right?
Yeah.
And don't be afraid to do that random thing. It's not going to, as long as you don't get in trouble, right? And to Dana's earlier point, right? Investors and everybody's looking at the subject line and, oh my God, you just offended the dolphin, right? But it's every once in a while, test ridiculous. Test near off brand, test something, right? As a just to throw caution to the wind without losing your job kind of thing, right? But the guidelines are there to help you know that your customer base react well to percentage off at a brand name every time you send an email. Fantastic. Why do I need to, why go granular to that? Check in and do testing every 6 months or 3 months, validate it, but test and move on.
Ryan, when you were talking about trying something random, it made me think of one day where we just decided to make an intentional mistake and just call out like, hey, happy birthday to like all of our customers, knowing that it was not their birthday. Well, actually, we probably hit like 40 people that it was their birthday. But we're like, this is intentional. They'll like open it up and it's like just a normal email. The open rates were super high. Be careful because the click rate had nothing, like the subject line was nothing to do with the content, but it did get opens and the click rate was like lower than average. But it was kind of fun. We didn't like have a crazy unsubscribe rate from it or anything like that too.
Yeah. And you can
was
get
the
away
click-through
with
rate lower than?
Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, was the click-through rate lower than average or the click-to-open rate? So did you actually generate more clicks?
Oh.
Even though?
Honestly, I do not remember, but I know the engagement itself was lower, and I think that was the click-to-open rate that was lower than average.
Yeah.
So you could have generated actually more clicks, but because you smashed it on the opens.
Correct. Created a bigger net.
Yeah. That's interesting.
Well, a brand that continually does great subject lines, great copy altogether. They can do very outlandish subject lines, but the copy and the offer fitted is who gives a crap. So if you guys aren't subscribed to them, just subscribe to them because they're absolutely brilliant. Obviously, we can't always be as, it's not within our brand guidelines to be able to be as outlandish as them because that is their brand. But it's really nice for inspiration.
Yeah, but that said, don't think because you work for a boring brand that you can't create an engaging subject line or engaging copy. It's not boring to the people that buy it. Probably.
Yeah, that's something they want.
So, so I wasn't going to go this direction, but we've kind of opened the door. So, most outlandish thing you've tested, or most epic subject line fail you've seen? And I mean, we've all seen the blank subject line and the TBD subject line, but a subject line you've seen, you've been like, ooh, well, I wouldn't have done that.
Oh.
Well, there was one that I it was a prospect that I didn't end up working with him, but we were in discussions, we had a few meetings and everything, and he was sort of telling me about his approach. And one of the things he would do on a regular basis, i.e. a couple of times a year, is he would do kind of like what Phil said that they did. They intentionally did a misleading subject line. And what he's saying is, but his was, 25% off. But then when you actually, no, let me get this right. It ended up being the deal was wrong. So it was like 15% off in the subject line maybe and 25% off in the body. And so everyone then went crazy because they went, oh, it's a mistake. And then what they would do is then do a follow-up campaign, and then they would do the 25% because we made it a mistake. And blah, 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 right? Some of their best sales, 3 times a year, because they're using this particular tactic.
I kind of like that. A little surprise and delight for Ben. I'm going to take a note for that.
Oops, we made a mistake, but you know what? We're going to honor it. It's all going to be fine. Yeah, and they got clicking like crazy.
So we did something similar. This was 10 years ago. We did the fake email to everybody. So we put test email in the subject line, and a subject line, but then inside we made some mistakes and we made some pricing, and we did the same thing. We followed back up with the apology. It was fantastic, but you can only do that once. You do it more, they either think you're incompetent or you're,
exactly
cheating them, right?
Exactly.
Best subject line I ever did though was it said do not open.
Right.
Phenomenal.
And we've all probably experienced it when we're really stuff up and we do an oops, right?
Yeah.
The oops emails, they're such high converters. Just doing an oops. I did a whole article and looked at a whole bunch of those type of emails. And it's inevitable that's going to happen at some stage in your career. So you do need to be prepared and understand what the brand wants to do, and you have to have a strategy in place. And one of them often will be, okay, we're going to do an oops, and then say, yes, we're going to honor the offer that was wrong or whatever it is. And you generally get 2 bites of the cherry.
Oh yeah, because the people that didn't see the first one, they see the oops and they're like, "Oh, now I want to see the mistake." So they go back through their inbox.
Yeah.
No, those are great.
A train wreck.
They do.
All right, that's how we got our audience. Frankly, to any epic fails anybody wants to, maybe not that you did, but that you've seen.
I think we sent an email out and none of the links worked. Like the website the products weren't loaded correctly. There was some feed delays, and you clicked in the email and it was just blank pages. And the whole email to the whole file was already out. So that was pretty rough.
I have read on a forum that someone, did the sort of, the placeholder, and they were being in a bit of a stroppy mood, so they kind of put something a bit rude, and then it ended up being sent out with that subject line.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, because there's some ESPs that force you to put a placeholder in. You have to put a subject line, then you can go back and do it. Well, they didn't go back.
Oh well, it's why we all still shake just a little bit when the fingers over the button.
Yeah.
Send now, not delay.
Yeah. Should no. That's why we've all heard people do that for us. Okay, so we're getting kind of close to the end of our time. And I know time always goes by too fast in these things.
It did go by so fast.
But I want to finish up with some future gazing. So what are some emerging trends, strategies, tactics, maybe something you haven't tested, you want to test? that you see coming down the line?
With regards to subject lines.
Yes. The title.
I'm glad you asked, because I had some things that were in my head. I was like, oh.
I'm all over the
if we go back to the title, Secrets to Crafting Compelling Subject Lines. But you're right, I did not make that clear. What are some emerging trends in subject line strategies and tactics is the question I have written down in front of me.
Right. Okay. So first of all, I love the fact that you've actually said that you can have a subject line strategy, right? And this goes back to what Ryan was saying, is finding that methodology, finding out and testing and working out, and that I think is an emerging trend, because there's not that many brands that do that. And again, if you wanted to, you could work along with ChatGPT, to be able to discover that and to work with that and everything. Just again, using it as inspiration if you find that it works for you, right, and your brand. But that to me is exciting. It's finding out, should I be using a verb, right, to front load? Should I be using some form of emotion? Do I want to be using it as ending up with a question mark? Do I want to be actually directing them to do something? So a call to action as such, directing them to take a step. All of those things you can formalize, and you can be testing very, very clearly once against the other. And again, that means that you need to be writing a hypothesis to be able to do that properly, and then testing it multiple times. But yes, testing. So the trend, I think, is doing that, but also strategic testing of subject lines, or strategic testing of emails altogether. I think the two of them in combination, they go together.
Excellent. Dana, what about you? What thoughts do you have?
I think that a lot of brands don't utilize updating the from or the friendly name to, work with their subject line. I think that that's a really good new tool that we could be doing. Would be my big thing.
How do you feel about, just again, because we're trying to stop scroll, like, making your from name, like a play off like a famous person's name.
Oh, well, I mean, I feel that that's like a little clickbaity.
Fair enough. I was at an event recently where somebody suggested that works really well, and I thought to myself, interesting.
We have loyalty programs, and we're sending out dedicated loyalty emails. Let's get a from name for loyalty. Just like utilizing, or you always have a sale every 6 months, utilizing that sale name as the from, just making it work harder, thinking outside of just the subject line.
I think that's a good suggestion across email in general. We've talked a lot about, say, testing subject lines, but we didn't really get into the notion of you need to be testing subject lines not just on your primary marketing communications, but on your customer service communications and on your lapsing programs and your loyalty programs, as you just said. There's a lot of work to do across the board. Phil, thoughts from you?
Yes. Well, I really like Kath's point about strategizing, because that honestly makes everything easier. And since we're all stressed about this thing that's important but not so important, being the subject line, why not just make it easy and do a lot of learnings up front, make your copywriter's life easier, so they have something to go towards. But what I was going to add was possibly using the pre-header, or the sneaky text, as I used to call it before I knew it was called a pre-header, to further explain your subject line, because your subject line is only so long, but you can get a little bit more explanation in there with that, and making use of that valuable space.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like the supporting statement for the call to action, right? It makes sense.
Right.
You're limited generally to how many characters you can do within a call to action, just because of design, factors. So you can use a supporting statement, and the pre-header works exactly the same. And I see too much misuse or not using it properly, but it's really there to support and expand upon the subject line. So yeah, great point, Phil.
Yeah, I can say conversely, I've also seen people like making their subject line stand out by not including a pre-header. So then there's like a little bit of space before like the next email in the inbox. So you can test that out as well and use it every once in a while.
That's a good idea. Mr. Phelan,
And
bring us home. Final
yes,
thoughts from
10
you, sir.
seconds or less. What I see as the innovation coming is the unification of ChatGPT and AI to assemble the email itself in terms of product language based on cohort and different characteristics within that cohort to make it a unified message from subject line all the way to the payoff of the message itself. That's really where I want to see the unification of data and intelligence translate into what the consumer gets on the back end. We're just at the infancy stage right now, but that extension into construction of the email based on data is where I think the win is.
I'm already working with two providers who are doing that. One's trialing it, one's implemented already. So, but yeah, it's interesting.
Well, that sounds like episode number 1 for series 4, 5, whatever. I can't remember what series we're up to.
5.
Next
episode number 1 for series 5. There we go. Well, thank you all. That's all we have time for today. Folks, let us know what you thought by giving us some comments in the chat. We do love to see what you have to say, and we do take on board all your feedback. Please join me in giving big thanks again to our speakers. Great panel today. Really, really enjoyed spending time with them. Thanks to our sponsors, platinum sponsor RPE Origin. Ryan, I don't usually get to say thank you personally, so thank you. And our silver sponsor, Bloomreach. Now, Kath and I will be back on June 13th with another expert panel discussing, as I said earlier, the ins and outs of the win-back campaign. Most of all, I think all the panelists would like to join me in thanking you, our audience, for spending your time with us today. We know that your time is precious, and we're glad that you were able to take some time out of your day. Hopefully you learned something. Hopefully you found it entertaining. And hopefully you've got an idea to go test when you get back to your desk, either later today or tomorrow. But until June, be safe and make good choices.